Advisory. At Circularium, we're a public policy and circular economy consultancy. We focus on policies, programs, and partnerships for a circular Africa. Over the past couple of years, we've worked with a number of governments and institutions, essentially, building policies and, developing platforms, as well as, creating partnerships, to drive plastic circularity in particular. Most recently, we worked with the World Economic Forum, the Global Plastic Action Partnership, in building what we call the National Plastic Action Partnerships across countries. And this is a platform that brings stakeholders together, government, civil society, and everyone who has interest in the plastic pollution issue, to sit together and have conversations around what concrete actions need to be done beyond pledges and all of the conversations that take place. We are also, developing roadmaps on what we call roadmaps for plastic action across countries, as well as, doing some deep dive, studies and research on what is the nexus between the plastic pollution challenge and trade. How can we leverage trade to drive plastic circularity across countries? And so this afternoon, what I will be sharing essentially would be my insights from the conversations, that have taken place. And I think the crux of it is basically, anchored on two platforms. One is the fact that we talk so much about circular economy, and most times the focus is around, how do we collect the waste, how do we recycle the waste. But there is not enough attention or action on how do we create markets to ensure that there can be demand, for the materials that have been collected and the materials that have been recycled. Because essentially what makes a market are two factors. First of all, you've got to have supply and you've got to have demand. And where you have supply and there is no demand, obviously that can be a market. And a market is essentially what makes an economy. So if we say we're building a circular economy, we need to be focused on those two prongs. The first thing is, how do we get access to the materials, which is where the focus currently is? But more importantly, what do we do with the materials after we've collected them? And how can we create scaled demand, for the products that have come out of that effort? And I think that is where the gap has been. And until we're able to create, large-scale demand for circular products, there is absolutely no way we can hope to make progress. The second plank of my conversation would be around creating regional value chains. We all know that recycling is a very expensive business, so it requires scale. But if, recyclers are locked into national markets as a result of several barriers at the regional level that does not allow for the expansion of regional trade, then it becomes a problem. So I think the challenge that we all need to tackle is, how can we increase the competitiveness of our recyclers in Africa? And I guess the way we can do that is also building scale for the market that they produce and breaking down the border barriers to ensure that they can trade across barriers in terms of feedstock and recyclates, including machineries, for circular product, would be very, very critical. Another important, reason why we need the regional recycling value chains is because, like we know, most of the countries are very small in terms of the volume of plastic they generate, and then that creates more problem around, establishing recycling operations in those countries, because you've got to have, a minimum number of quantity for it to make sense. And if you are able to trade feedstocks across the countries, then it is possible for us to build a hub and scope approach where you can have, a base market, and then you have feeder markets that then can get their products, recycled and are able to get recyclage from there. So I think, those are the two conversations that I would like us to reflect on this afternoon as I make my contribution.